Recognising our true identities. We all know racism is a worldwide problem. We all know it occurs in Australia too. We all know it occurs in our schools, our workplaces, and we even see it in the news. Most people would agree that racism is unfair and cruel, but I think that there is another problem that I'm going to address. When companies are looking for employees, they might leave out a person because of their surname or skin colour. Or at school, people will sometimes be teased for wearing a hijab just for celebrating their country's culture. This is not okay, and I think it needs to change. People often get too scared to show their true culture, and they often hide it from society. When I was researching for my speech, I found a recent interview about racism with a lady called Diana. She said, when I was going through my teenage years, Pauline Hanson came out to Dandenong, and I specifically remember eggs being thrown at her and her saying yellow Asian people. Diana, who is now 27, also said, for the first time I realised I was an Asian person. I remember being so scared that my mum would be sent back to Vietnam. Back then, Diana's defence against racist attitudes was to appear as Australian as she could. She adopted Hawthorn as her footy team and followed cricket with a passion. But as Diana says, days were often grey days, feeling like no one understands you, and your community is represented by colour and not the stories that you have to share. It is only since Diana finished her university degree, became a community development worker, and took the time to learn her mother's story that she has truly felt comfortable in her own skin and her own culture. Diana reflected that in the past 3 or 4 years, she has gotten to know her mother's story. She realises now the sacrifices her mother made for her and her sisters, and wishes she had recognised how stubborn she was being and learnt her mother's language. This is one of the many sad stories people have had to experience through their childhood and life in Australia. As we all know, Australia is a very diverse country, meaning it has a variety of different cultures, people and opinions. Due to this, in some places, racism is quite common. In my own family, we have Indigenous heritage, but my papa and his siblings were brought up by their father not to recognise this, as they were already disadvantaged living in the country on the poverty line. They'd experienced stories of his paternal grandmother being part of the stolen generation. But the truth is, they should have been allowed to proudly recognise our origin from the Wirrawaddy Nation from the Cootamundra area, where my great-great-grandmother Daisy was born. I think that it is very wrong people think they have to hide their identities and cultures because they're scared of being at risk of prejudice and racism attitudes. I'm truly upset that my great-grandfather felt the need to hide his true heritage from society, which means I'm unable to recognise my own, and honestly, I'm frustrated. Like me, my mother and my grandfather also wished they had been educated about the traditions and stories of our family, of our Indigenous family. In conclusion, whether you're a Vietnamese refugee or an Indigenous person, the reality is that everybody's human and everybody has their own background that is just as important about anyone else's, no matter what anybody says or thinks. You have no need to be ashamed of who you are, because we should all be equals. And after all, we're all Australian. Thank you.